Good. So welcome. So let's make a first a quick introduction. My name is Fernando Corredor. I'm part of what we call wireless business development in Alcatel Lucent. Alcatel Lucent is a big company. Business development is the type of task that you do when you are helping the sales guys to sell some product or service. So we go to the customers and we try to sell the product that we sell or the services that we promote. It's a kind of very interesting activities because it has a technical background, but it's very close to the customer. So once you're out of the university, you will start knowing what type of jobs you can find and roles you can play. Being close to the customer is very exciting. And there are a lot of things you can do. You can be close to the customer, you can be in the back office, far away from the customer, but all companies, the main goal is to sell things. And we are not an exception here. So, the title of this lecture, or workshop, or whatever you want to call it, is Why Small Cells Make a Big Difference. It's all about small cells, but I will be covering a lot of things. First of all, I will start by a short introduction about Alcatel Lucent. I'm sure you all know companies like Google, maybe Cisco, maybe Ericsson. I don't know if you ever heard about Alcatel Lucent. You know what we do? What we do?
IT.
Sorry?
IT.
IT. Okay.
But from the hardware part.
Okay. Not far away. we will see what we do because it basically what we will see. Then for those of you who are not actually in the telecommunications area, it's good to have some basic knowledge about the radio technology, especially the radio access technology, because to understand the role small cells will play in the Internet of Things, we need to understand which are the kind of, and a small cell is a small radio base station, just as an anticipation of what we'll see. But the base station that we have today, radio base stations are the responsible for you to be able to communicate with your smartphone, with your friends and your family. So it's good to have some basic knowledge of what is the architecture in radio mobile communication. Then we will go deeply into why small cells are needed and why will they be so important. We will also tackle the tricky point of how small cells will be integrated into the existing networks. We'll have time to discuss that. I will show you some examples of small cells. And I will finish just with some, I'm not offering you a job here, but we just wanted to show some initiatives we do in Alcatel Lucent, especially in Belgium, where there are some job vacancies that you can apply. Okay? So this is the agenda for today. You can sleep, but you cannot snore. So let's start. So Alcatel Lucent actually is not, we don't manufacture terminals. So you probably know that there are user terminals, mobile phones, with the brand Alcatel. This is not Alcatel. So Alcatel Lucent is a merge between Alcatel, a former French company, and Lucent Technologies, which was an American company. The merge took place at the end of 2006. And now we do, or we sell, telecommunication infrastructure, no terminals. Okay. This means a lot of things, product and services, but no terminals. So I don't know if you can read the slide on Pepe. Can you read the slide? Can you read the numbers more or less? Yeah. Okay, good. So some numbers just to give you an idea of where we are. So we are a 62,000 employees company in more than 150 countries. So if you haven't heard before about Lucent, probably in your country, in your city, there's an office for Alcatel Lucent. We used to be even more, but sometimes we have to be, or in the past few years, we have to reshape a little bit our business, and we reduced a little bit from 70,000 to 60,000. Last year revenues were around 14 billion euros, which is not bad. What we have a lot of people, good people, of course. We have a lot of patents. Last year we filled 3,000. We have more than 32,000 active patents. We are collaborating with a lot of universities around the world. We have even some Nobel Prizes. 7 Nobel Prizes coming from different places. And if you want to understand the shape, how big Alcatel is, you can see that network operators, which are guys like Movistar, Telefonica, Vodafone, or Verizon, or Orange, those are big operators. We have more than 1,000 customers for those operators providing telecommunication services. We have more than 500,000 enterprise customers. An enterprise customer is, for instance, this university. So this university requires telecommunication, a small telecommunication infrastructure, the local area network, the fixed phones. We sell fixed phones. We do sell fixed phones, fixed lines, as part of the enterprise business. We sell all those devices. And we are present in more than 1 million networks. So we can say that we are almost everywhere. Again, no terminals. And some of the things that we sell, which are especially important, are capabilities to deploy 400 gigabit per second IP ports, or 400 gigabit per second optics connections, or new DSL features that will increase the bandwidth that you can get in your standard DSL connection. One important point here is that we have been recognized for 3 years in a row as part of the top 100 most innovative companies. This is a report made by Thomson Reuters, and Alcatel has been, let's say, ranking in the top 100, which is something that probably you will never believe, because if I ask you which is the most innovative company, or just name 2 or 3 companies which are focused on innovation, and so you will say Google, Apple, WhatsApp, Instagram, Cisco maybe, because those are the companies that you see in front of you. So anytime you do a Google search, you see Google. What you don't see is all the routers that you have, or Google has behind in their network, which are coming from Alcatel, or from Cisco, or from Ericsson, or from other infrastructure vendors. Okay? So this is Alcatel. One other thing we have is what we call the Bell Labs. I don't know if you heard about Bell Labs. So Bell Labs is Bell Laboratories, is the foundation of our innovation. Innovation is one of the key assets in our company. And the Bell Labs is like the gurus. It's not R&D. So R&D is research and development. And the R&D guys, they are developing something that will become a product, or will be a product. However, Bell Labs are more focused on innovating, on finding new ways of solving problems. And these are some examples. You know, these guys contributed to, by the way, the Bell Labs was, the original Bell Laboratories was created by Alexander Graham Bell. You know, who is Alexander Graham Bell. It evolved, it was part of AT&T in the United States, and now it's part of Alcatel. But it still remains the same idea behind, which is innovation. I'm sure you'll have an MP3 player. So guys from Bell Labs contributed a lot to define and to invent the audio codec that you can find in an MP3 player. Or things like, we will see the small cells. Or things like satellite-based networks. So there are a lot of areas where the Bell Labs contribute to create innovative ideas. And recently, we are focusing on cloud. So now everything is on the cloud. And this is important in a network infrastructure point of view, because on the IT world, cloud is something that probably will be, or is already accepted in a carrier environment, and in carrier telecom vendor like Telefonica, like BT, like those big monsters. Having things on the cloud, you need to break some rules. And now all the industry is moving to the IT world, and things that were before just a dedicated hardware, an application or a piece of software running in a dedicated hardware, like a router. Now those functions are being moved up to the cloud. And quantum computing, which I don't know what it is, but I guess it will be the next generation of computers. Based on transistors. Computers today are based on transistors. Somebody has invented something that will be changing. A little bit on market share based on revenues. So I don't know if you recognize, but Alcatel is number one in a lot of the fixed access business. Fixed access is all the infrastructure that you have to deploy as an operator to give you DSL or broadband access to your place, to your home. You have a DSL connection at your home, you have a DSL router. What's behind that, all the network required to provide you this service, is what we call fixed access. And we have different technologies, VDS, VDSL2 is the evolution of the VDSL, which is very high-speed data to go from, I don't know, 6 megabits to maybe 20 or 15. So all those technologies are coming from fixed access. Then you have IP and MPLS routers. MPLS is MPLS. Have you ever heard of MPLS? So MPLS is a level 2 or level 2 protocol, which is today deployed everywhere. It's very efficient, and it's you can compare MPLS as what IP was maybe 15 years ago, or what maybe ATM was even before that. Well, some numbers on LTE, especially in LTE, we are number 3 worldwide with 60% market share. Okay, so that was Alcatel Lucent. Any question? Now you know better Alcatel Lucent. So now let's talk a little bit about the radio access technologies, because it's important to understand what is how the architecture of a radio access network is built. And let me start by briefly describing some very boring stuff, the standards. So you know that we have 4G now. I guess some of you have a smartphone supporting 4G, right? But before coming here, we made a very long way to 4G. So remember 2G, GSM? I don't know if you ever had a GSM only. You are too young to that. GSM was mainly voice and SMSs. Okay, voice and SMS. It was a good technology because it was the first digital technology. Before 2G, everything was analog. Now we moved to, some years ago, we moved to UMTS. Especially in Europe, UMTS was called 3G. And 3G, as a difference with 2G, 2G could not give actually data rate. 2G was for voice. 3G could give some data communication, data traffic, because it defined different planes from voice and from data. With UMTS, you can get at least 14 megabits per second bandwidth, which is good. It's almost as a DSL connection. But then you have 3.5G, which is what we have today. So all 3G smartphones will support what we call 3.5, which basically can give you 21 megabits per second if you are in optimal radio conditions, which is good. And if you are alone in the cell, in the coverage area. And now we are moving to 4G. And what is actually showing this slide is that before there were some different technologies being deployed in different countries. You could go with a GSM phone to the United States and it wouldn't work because they were using different standards. You could go with your GSM mobile phone to Japan and it wouldn't work because they were using a different standard. Now all the standards are luckily converting to 4G. So now 4G is being the chosen wireless technology for the future in all the countries. 4G is being deployed widely in the United States today and in Korea. It's not so massively deployed in Europe. In Spain, we launched it just last year, France last year, in Italy as well. So it's taking some time to actually massively see 4G because operators, they still need to focus on maybe monetizing all the investment they made on 3G. Okay? Those standards here that you can see are were deployed in the United States and some countries in Latin America as well. So this is the architecture of a mobile network. And I want to avoid you getting very bored here, but it's good to understand that in 2G and 3G, GSM and UMTS, you have your mobile phone which is connected to the base station to the air interface. Okay, pretty simple. And then the base station needs to be controlled by another guy here, which is the BSC, the BSS system controller or the radio network controller, which actually these guys have most of the intelligence. So the base station is just an antenna transmitting, receiving power, taking care of probably the access of the mobile network, but all the intelligence actually is focused here. So GSM UMTS, you have actually all communications here. These links here are TDM or ATM. I don't know if you know, these are very old communications technology as opposed to IP. And then you have the BSC here and the RNC, which connect to what we call the core network. So when you are doing a phone call with your 3G phone, you are connecting to the base station. The base station is giving you some resources. Then you have signaling and user plane, signaling, which is just all the communication done to control the calls. Then you have the data, the call itself goes to the BSC RNC, and then you have two different planes, one for voice and one for data. So when your mobile phone is doing a call, it goes to the BSC or the RNC, and then it is routed to the circuit core domain. If you are doing a data call, it goes to the packet core domain, which is different, completely different. And this is simply switched, meaning there is a connection established, end-to-end connection established all the time for the voice call. That is the old UMTS or GSM infrastructure. On LTE, what we have is a different story, because on LTE, it's similar, but it's very, I don't know if you notice some difference here.
There doesn't seem to be a difference between the voice and the data.
Correct. So that's a big difference. There is a huge difference because, first of all, everything is IP. So from the base station here, we used to have protocols like X25 or TDM, ATN, as I mentioned before. Now we have IP. Another big important difference is that those base stations, and we will see later some pictures of what is a base station, are controlled by something here. There's a hierarchy that needs to be respected. So all the calls coming from this person here, which is controlled by this base station, to this person here, which is controlled by this base station, all this communication has to go this way. Okay? And this RNC or DSC controls everything. In this case, there is no such controller. So the architecture is flat, meaning that there is a new interface which is allowing the nodes B or the base stations to talk to each other. And this is again a big difference. And LTE, why it's so important is because it can give you more spectral efficiency. Everything is IP. You can get up to 150 megabits per second, depends on the bandwidth that you have. So it's completely different architecture. There is a disruption between the GSM UMTS architecture and the LTE architecture. Okay. Well, I don't want to spend too much time here, but it's important to understand that once you leave the base station, you connect to the core. And the core, there are some nodes here which are actually collecting all the information from the nodes. This is like a router because in LTE everything is IP. Even the voice is IP, so all our packets, IP packets going and coming, which is different from this architecture. Any questions or any doubt? Even if you have 3 questions. Okay. So this is a typical base station, and I wanted to show you what a base station is, how big it is, or the shape it has, because when we go to small cells, you can feel the difference. So what is our radio base station? And this applies to all the technologies. So basically, you have typically the digital modules, which are responsible for the call processing, the modems that control the calls and the data. And this is typically installed inside a cabinet. Okay. Then you have what we call the radio modules. And the radio modules is where you have your amplifiers, your filters, your duplexers. There are 2 flavors. The first flavor is when you install the radio part together with the digital modules in the same cabinet. Okay? This is the installation or the configuration that we used to have in the past. This is a cabinet, like 2 meters high and maybe 1 meter width. You can install in what we will see in a rooftop or inside a shelter, and this radio module could give you maybe 20, 40 volts of transmit power. What you have here from the radio module is just a radio frequency cable to the antenna. That's all you have. Okay? What's the issue with this? Is that you install this maybe in a rooftop, and you have the antenna very close to that. It's okay. Your 40 volts here, you can just miss some dBs, but everything is okay. But if you are having a long distance between the radio modules and the antenna, the output power could just be divided by 2. There's 40 volts here, will be 20 volts on the top of the antenna. And those are equipment which are very expensive. One of the issues with radio stations is the power consumption and the money that the operator needs to pay actually to lease the space or the site where those cabinets are installed. So what actually is what we are deploying today in all the countries, in all the operators, is what we call the distributed solutions. The distributed solutions means that as opposed to have the radio modules close to the digital modules inside the cabinet, those radio modules are installed very close to the antennas. So this connection between the digital modules and the remote radio head is a fiber link, so there is no loss, everything is okay. And the distance between the radio unit and the antenna can be just centimeters or can be just a few meters. So you gain a lot of, you don't lose so many dBs when you have this type of installations. And this is I would say, not the only deployment that you have today, but most of the operators in the European countries and in developed countries go for this option. This is okay because it allows you to have more flexibility. You can imagine all the programs that you can find to install a huge cabinet to, in the rooftop or in the middle of the country. This allows you to install the radio unit very close to the antenna. You can install it everywhere. It's an outdoor equipment, so it doesn't matter. It's ready for higher temperatures. So those are the two configurations. Compact, inside a cabinet, everything inside a cabinet. We just need an RF cable to the antenna. And then the other distributed solution, which has the radio part distributed separately from the digital module. Okay. Any question or? And by the way, this interface here, what is coming from the controller, is this interface here. Okay. So the interface that is coming out of the node B or the base station is actually coming from the digital module. So here we connect with those interfaces to the Corredor. Okay. Have you ever seen a base station in real life?
Yeah.
Yes. So these are I have called this the true architecture where you can see. I'm sure you have seen this before, right?
Yeah.
This is probably not a base station. Those are just the antennas. Let's go back. The antennas here is what you can see here. If you cannot see here, we will see in the following slide. So this is to show you how difficult it is to install a base station. Because this is a must. As you can see, there are a lot of antennas here. These are probably 2 different technologies being deployed in this site. This is a tower. The tower are very expensive. You have to pay a lot of money to lease a tower, or you can deploy it in a rooftop, and you have to pay a lot of money to keep this to the building owner. So those are just antennas. But what is behind this is the other part, which is all the big guys. So in the best case, you can find a small cabinet like this one, which is called an outdoor cabinet, where you have all your digital modules. Then from this cabinet, I can just connect to the remote radio head that I showed you before, and from that to the antenna. But in some cases, in most of the cases, what you need is this type of shelters here, and inside this, you have all those cabinets with the radio modules, with the digital modules, with the air conditioning, with the batteries. So it's not that simple. You see an antenna and you think that's all it is. It's not. you have to consider those are real installations that you have when you're deploying radio base stations. And what is the issue? The issue is that we already have too many. If you ask any operator in developed countries how easy it is to find a new site to deploy a new base station, they will tell you that it's kind of headache. Okay. Good. Now let's talk about small cells a little bit. So rapidly changing the environment. Why we are calling this section like this? Because actually you probably are used to work with your smartphone and send data and receive data. You have your habits, but it was not before like this. So there are some trends in the market that are requiring new type of radio base stations, and we cannot just use the macro base station. So let me give you some example. We are changing the way we are communicating. For instance, there are some studies saying that mobile broadband connection will increase dramatically in the next 2-3 years, and you can prove that yourself. If you never had a smartphone and you buy a smartphone, then you realize all the things you can do. And you are, of course, you know better than me that the applications in your smartphone are sending and receiving data without you knowing that. There are more smartphones than ever, so sometimes it's difficult to find just a plain and simple phone, just to make calls and SMSs. Everything is a smartphone. Okay? This means that the data is, the smartphone is sending data all the time. And the network needs to be ready for that. And the more smartphone you have, the more data they send, then the more base station you need. This is the issue. In terms of applications, of course, 5 years ago, the number of applications that you can install in your smartphone was not that big. Now, have you counted, if you have an iPhone and Android, have you counted the number of applications you have installed? By chance?
100.
200.
Wow.
At least. Maybe, I don't know, maybe 200, but 50? Very simple. Yeah, just by default, in other countries, 50. So, and you cannot, by the way, you cannot install some of them.
Yeah.
So they will be there forever. Sending data, by the way. And once you have a user experience, once you are used to send data and receive data quickly or fast, and download a YouTube video very quickly, not having that capability probably will make you upset.
Yeah.
And this is all about user experience. So we are changing, the mobile phones are changing actually the landscape, but we are also changing the way we communicate. So as I mentioned before, before it was just voice. I was just using my mobile phone to call my friend just to talk. We don't talk anymore, probably. And we used to have a family phone, a fixed phone. And when I came home, I used to switch on my phone, my mobile phone. I have my fixed phone. If anyone wants to contact me, they will call my home, not my mobile phone. Now, you can live without a fixed phone. Everyone has, and the mobile phone is a private item. It's a personal item. It's not a family phone anymore. So we are changing the way we use the smartphone from voice to basically entertaining and social networking. Videos, chats, whatever you want to call it. And of course, we are also changing where we use the smartphones. So before we used the phone when we were out of home, or we were traveling, now we use it everywhere. So these are things that you probably consider that are very clear and very simple. And those things are changing the way the operators need to tackle the issue of lack of basic capacity. If we all here try to download the same YouTube video at the same time, what do you think would happen?
Collapse.
Probably the first one will be lucky and will get all the resources, but the rest will have to wait. And this is happening all the time, right? You have good bad coverage, or you have a lot of people doing the same. You are going to a football game, or you're going to a live music event. You will notice that. So, what the issue with when we want to solve this capacity issue, what is the approach? So we can deploy more macro stations. As I mentioned before, it's not easy. It's very expensive and it's cumbersome. It's not really simple to find a new place to deploy such a big base station. And besides that, there are things that you cannot get. You want to give coverage in rural areas. There's always spots where the operators will never bring the mobile network because it's too expensive. I need to go there, I need to rent a tower or some other stuff, and I need to bring the backhaul or the transmission link, and it's very costly. They will not do it, and they will leave coverage holes, and especially in rural areas, and also in what we call in-building penetration, which is another issue. So sometimes you are out of the building, it's okay, but when you are indoor, your coverage starts degrading. Sometimes you can improve your capacity by deploying more macro base stations, but sometimes you cannot. And especially the indoor coverage issue, you cannot solve it with macro base stations. So the only solution could be maybe small cells. So when we talk about solving this capacity issue, as I mentioned, once you get used to what you are used to in terms of data throughput, in terms of user experience, the time you spend downloading a video on YouTube, operators need to manage this increased data traffic that we saw before. So you can go and, for instance, solve the issue by deploying a new technology like LT. In case of the most of the Western European countries, we are just in the first phases of LT, especially because it provides a user experience that 3G cannot go. And the 3G network is saturated, it's overloaded most of the time, especially in hotspots or places where there are a lot of people in business areas. So the only thing you can do to differentiate you as a vendor, as a telecommunication provider, is to deploy something else, which is, for instance, LT. LT can give you better user experience because you can get 75 megabits per second. Have you tried LT or 4G? Every one of you have tried 4G? Did you run a speed test for it?
Yes, but I was supposed to subscribe to the outload. It was also 70-ish megabits per second.
Okay. And if you compare, I've been doing a lot of tests with my colleagues with comparing 3G and 4G in the same place. And it's not, once you try LTE or 4G, you don't want to come back to 3G. It's like when you're moving from DSL to fiber. So it's like the 9 and 8. So you don't want to go back to the DSL. So that's one option, and the other option is to actually to move the antennas closer to the user. So if we were able to move the antennas from the rooftop, from those towers, closer to where they are needed, that would be a solution to manage this capacity issue. Okay, and this is where the smart cell will come in place. So I will skip this one. So one of the important things is that small cells are trying to solve basically the user experience issue that we have to provide additional capacity. Capacity is one of the main issues that we have, or the operators have. Coverage is, in previous deployments, it was coverage the only goal. So a mobile operator gets to deploy more base stations to provide coverage, and it was the differentiator. So if I go to operator A, I can have a good coverage, and maybe the operator B in Spain, we used to say, Orange is not giving me good coverage. Vodafone or Movistar are giving good coverage. So this is the differentiator. Now it's about capacity. And the only thing you can actually do to increase capacity, doing efficiency, is when you are getting really close to the user. And this is where I mentioned before, where small cells will play the role. Do you know what is a heterogeneous network? Because this is a new concept coming in the industry, in the radio domain. Means a network which provides different radio access technologies at the same time. What we have today is you can have 2G, GSM, and 3G in the same place. So you have your 2G macro layer, your 3G macro layer, but those layers, they are not talking to each other. You have a Wi-Fi hotspot, that's okay, but there is no coordination between those layers. And a heterogeneous network means improving this coordination, providing coordination into the different layers. And I'm talking about basically small cells, which are deployed A small cell is a small base station providing a small coverage, below a big base station providing a very high coverage, and living with Wi-Fi, living with 3G and with 2G. And we need to coordinate all those layers to provide the best user experience to the users. Now you have your mobile phone, and as soon as you get home, I'm sure you will connect to the Wi-Fi. Right? But what if the Wi-Fi is overloading? You need to manually switch it off, for instance, and connect to the 3G or the 4G connection. Right? There is no intelligence behind. So you just arrive home and then you automatically connect to Wi-Fi. If you are in the university and you have a free Wi-Fi or you have paid for a Wi-Fi service, you will connect automatically to the Wi-Fi. But just because you have selected that Wi-Fi before, but if it is overloaded, you need to do something manually. So this EthNet concept is about actually coordinating all those layers together to find the best radio access technology in the right moment for the users. And it means one important point here, supporting things like multi-vendor, meaning vendor Alcatel Lucent deploying macro layer, and vendor, let's say, Ericsson deploying small cells, or the other way around. Because when you are building telecommunications networks, if everything is from the same vendor, everything works fine. When you are mixing two vendors, sometimes things don't work as you probably would. So it's important to support different vendors for the operator. This is very important to have different vendors in the network, and also manage the interference. The radio interference that you will have with macro, with metro cells, with the small cells. Okay, let's see some now. Why we need the small cells? So, small cells are, as I mentioned before, small radio base stations. You have to have in mind the picture that I showed you before, with this big shelter cabinet, the antennas. The small cells can be, or we in Alcatel Lucent and I think it's in all the industry, you have three different segments. You have the residential, so small cells called femtocells, which are being deployed at home. And these are basically for private use, indoor. Okay? And it's owned by the consumer. So I can buy a femto from Movistar and I install it in my place, and I have my coverage for me, just for me. For me or for who I decided to give access to. Because I can decide to be open or closed, meaning everyone could connect or just me and my family. Enterprise segment is similar, but for the business environment. A university could be an enterprise, or the Pizza, or the McDonald's. They can deploy or a small office, or a big office. Basically, those are small cells deployed indoor as well. Can be private or public, meaning only for the employees working in this business, or for the employees and for all the visitors going to that business. Okay. And it's owned by the business. It's owned by the university. I buy these small cells, and I decide if I want to grant access to everyone or just to my students. And then the metro. The metro cells is a different story because those are indoor and outdoor, and are owned by the operator. So there's a big difference because it's in this case the operator, the Movistar, the Orange, the Vodafone, who owns the infrastructure as the macro base stations, and are for public places, almost all the places. Okay. And the good things about the small cells is that you can place them where you need them. As opposed to a macro base station where, okay, I can need a macro base station to provide rural coverage in a given area, but I cannot deploy such a big base station because I need a lot of power, I need the transmission link. The small cells can be placed everywhere. Can be placed exactly where I need them. For capacity, I can just install a small cell in a lamppost, in a bus stop, wherever I want. And I will provide the capacity that I don't have. I can use it for indoor locations. If I am, probably you have experienced lack of coverage inside a shopping mall, for instance. Probably you don't have coverage there because for a reason. Probably because the operator cannot deploy more base stations. You install a small cell inside the shopping mall, then you will solve the coverage and the capacity issue. And of course, for rural, it's very convenient. You will see pictures of small cells. It's a small device. Of course, it's not to provide high capacity. But at least you will solve the problem of the rural areas where you don't have anything. And then at least you will have some mobile service. Okay. Why the small cells actually make sense? So there are some reasons listed here. First of all, you don't need towers. It must be simple to say, but it implies a lot of savings for the operators. One of the most important things for the operators is what we call the OPEX, the operational expenditures. When you buy a car, it's not the price you pay for the car when you take it out of the car dealer. When you pay every year on gas for the garage, that's the OPEX. And sometimes the OPEX is more expensive than the CAPEX, which is the capital expenditure. When you buy a car, this is your CAPEX. When I buy a PlayStation, it can be very cheap. But I need to look at what I pay every year. And renting a tower is not only renting the tower. If I install an antenna at 30 meters from the ground, and I have an issue, I need to send someone to fix it. And this someone needs to have a lot of certificates. I need to be with a lot of security constraints. So it's not that simple. It's very expensive. So not having to deploy towers is very good. We can reuse the existing street furniture, all the urban furniture that you can find, as I mentioned before. A bus stop. You can use a bus stop to install a small cell. You can provide more coverage. You can, TCO is the total cost of ownership is the CAPEX plus the OPEX. So it's all you pay to deploy something. In this case, is what you pay for the equipment and what you pay every year for the maintenance of that equipment. We can actually provide what we call the 5 bars of voice quality. So, and this means that all the users will be able to have 5-bar coverage. So all of them will be able to have high quality voice. All of them will be able to have the maximum bandwidth possible, and it will also benefit in your battery life because the farther you are from the base station, the more power your terminal needs to send the data and to receive the data. So being close to the small cells or having the small cells so close, your terminal will save a lot of power, which is a big issue. Probably you know that. So battery life is being increased, of course, with the deployment of small cells because the terminals need to use less transmit power. And at the end, we will see some other examples why small cells are so important. Any question or comment so far? Yes?
So how is it connected to mesh networks? Is it connected at all?
Sorry?
To mesh networks. So, for example, I have a mobile phone which has both Wi-Fi and 4G, and somebody who is close to me, but for some obscure reason, doesn't have 4G, but has Wi-Fi. So he connects to me and shares my 4G connection. This is connected to small cells.
It's connected at the end. Small cells is just giving you the radio resources. From that point of view, it doesn't matter if it's connected to a small cell or to a big cell. A small cell is a small radio base station. And the only difference that you will be saving battery, you will be providing better service to who is connected to you. But the concept is the same as for a macro base station. Any other? Okay. So for the operators, well, more of the same. But in this case, small cells, as opposed to what we have today, that you have a radio base station which is for 3G, for UMTS, a different radio base station for GSM, and a different radio base station for AT. The small cells will tend to be multi-standard, meaning the same box will provide 3G, 4G, and Wi-Fi. So this is very convenient to solve all these Linux network issues. So it's good for them because the 3G smartphones could be upgraded to 4G without having to impact those users that will not lose any service. You can, of course, coordinate Wi-Fi. You will reduce the number of sites, the number of backhaul requirements. Backhaul is the communication between the base station and the core, just to clarify. And of course, we'll support voice over LTE. Voice over LTE is, so today, you know that the LTE is being deployed, or 4G is being deployed. As I mentioned at the beginning, LTE is a full IP architecture. So voice is voice over IP. But it's not the voice over IP that you can have today with Skype or with Google Talk. That you are using an IP connection to talk. It's the same as you are using Skype at home. You use an IP connection, and you open a Skype or IP. Okay? So this communication is not voice over LTE. Voice over LTE is a special way of sending voice packets over an IP network.
El aire.
So this, in order to explain why small cells are really needed and why are good, we run a lot of studies, and this is just one example. In this case, this is an operator that has deployed 3G and is having some capacity constraints, some capacity issues. Okay. So then all the people need to take over, the technical department need to take a decision. What do we do? The first thing you can do is to deploy more 3G sites. WCDMA, by the way, WCDMA is the technology for UMTS. It's 3G technology, what we have today in a smartphone. Okay? So I need to manage the capacity that I will need because I have some traffic forecast in my hands, and I see that with the network, as I have it today, I will not be able to provide the same service in the coming few years, for instance. Okay? Just imagine the smartphones increase, the increase in smartphones that I mentioned before. So more data coming, so the operator thinks, I need to do something. This something can be just deploying more macro base stations. Okay? And this gives you, the exercise gives you that I will require almost 800 new sites to deploy, to manage that capacity forecast that I have. The other option is to deploy LTE, which is more efficient for capacity, and combine this with the small cells. Okay. And then the exercise shows you that you will need only 221 LTE sites, and yeah, a lot of small cells, almost 2,000, 1,800 small cells. Are they many? I don't know. This is a good comparison. But when we go to this chart here, the same exercise is showing you that the TCO, the total cost of ownership in 5 years, meaning all the money that I will spend to invest, or that I have to spend to buy the equipment and to maintain the equipment, okay? The car that I pay and the gas and the garage, everything. In the second case is lower. You can save up to 45% of your total cost of ownership by the second option. Instead of deploying more WCDMA sites, you go to the LTE and small cells to complement that. And the money you have to pay in 5 years is less than that. And if you go to the other chart, which shows you the power cost of those two cases, is even, the savings are even higher. In terms of power, which is very, very important, because the electricity that you require for a macro base station is pretty high. So this also justifies the business case. So those are the type of graphs you can actually use when we vendors do when we are trying to open a discussion with the vendors, with the operators, to convince them that the small cells is a good solution. It's a theoretical exercise, by the way, but it shows it's based on real data. So it's based on the real cost of things, not something that we have invented. Okay? So the bottom line here is small cells. You can deploy more small cells, but at the end the cost will be lower. So let's see some pictures. Okay, so those are some small cells from the what we call femtocells from the residential market. So Alcatel Lucent sells some of these boxes. You can see the logo here and this one here. And we also work with some other manufacturers like Sicel or Sagen or others, device manufacturers. We provide the internal RF connection and chipset, and they build the case and they build all the brand. But these are macro. It's a small base station. So it's the same thing as you can see as in the picture that we saw before, the big antennas. So everything is here. Actually, this is good because the controllers, remember in the UMTS and in the the GSM, that there were two guys controlling everything, the DSC, the RNC. All this intelligence is just collapsed in this small box. And this small box, in Spain, Movistar is commercializing this box, is using your DSL connection. So you just plug this into your DSL router. It's plug and play. You have 20 millivolts. So it's not very powerful, but it can give coverage wherever you don't have coverage. It can give you 4 simultaneous users. So 4 people can be talking at the same time. And it's, it's just plug and play. I mean, if it was not plug and play, it would not fly. Because, if you have to send one expert to every single home where you want to deploy such a small device, then you will not make business. It's like deploying a DSL router. You go, you buy it, and you install it by yourself. You just plug it and you expect to work. This is the same thing. But the good point is that it's using your DSL. So the operator just sells you a box. You are paying for the box. I didn't have coverage. I buy one of these boxes, and all of a sudden, I have coverage. And I can make calls when it was not possible before. And I can decide if I give access to just me, my friends, if I'm sharing a flat, or even the neighbors. I can give access to the neighbors because I control who I want to connect to the small cell. And the operator just needs to provide the DSL. By the way, you were paying for the DSL already. Okay? So this is to avoid these situations here. So these small cells are typically deployed for coverage. Now we move to the enterprise. Remember the enterprise segment? It's the same. It's for indoor coverage, but these guys here are a little bit bigger. So I must tell you, this one, by the way, this is like these PLC devices that you can buy that provides internet over the electricity lines. So this is a femtocell. You just plug it into the power socket and you have 3G coverage. It's very small, it's this size. So these enterprise versions here are higher, are more bigger, but not that big. I mean, it's like a piece of paper. Provides more users. You can have up to 32 simultaneous users. You can have 20 megabit per second downlink. You can have Wi-Fi integrated, and it uses again a DSL connection. Or just by the way, it's just an Ethernet cable what you have here. So you have here, for instance, you have an Ethernet cable. I connect this femtocell, and I will get an IP, and I will get the service. So it's as simple as that. We will show you a little bit later the architecture, why this is possible. But it doesn't require a specific transmission link for me, or by the operator, or the operator having to go to every single place to choose the right transmission link. Just plug it in the LAN, in the local area network. It will get an IP, and it will know how to connect to the operator of the world. Okay, and it's very important because all operators are providing service to the public. We as individuals have a mobile phone, but one important part of their business is the enterprise segment. So they would like to provide. I mean, Telefonica or Vodafone. They want to give the service to El Corte Inglés or to Endesa. So all the communications or all the employees working in El Corte Inglés or in Endesa will be provided by Vodafone, for instance. And if you don't have good coverage inside the building, then your customers, the employees working in Endesa, will complain. So, and if they complain, probably next year when the contract expires, they will change to the other vendor. So, if you have coverage issues or capacity issues, you can deploy these small boxes inside the enterprise, and you will solve the issue. Okay. And then you have what in Alcatel Lucent called the metro cells, which are, remember, the metro cells were supposed to be installed outdoor, sometimes indoor as well, but for public. Those are small base station as well, but are bigger. So I forgot to say, these guys here can have up to 250 millivolts. You know how many millivolts you have in your DSL router typically? 100 millivolts. With your DSL router, your Wi-Fi router that you probably have is around 100 millivolts. And it's enough for most of the places. I mean, unless you have a very big house, maybe 3 floors with a lot of garden. But other than that, any apartment, any flat with 100 millivolts is more than enough. So 250 millivolts is a lot. And these are different versions that we have from different flavors. We have external antennas. Those are only directional antennas. This version here, by the way, this is all you see. Remember that we talked about the compact architecture and the distributed architecture before? Okay, that the compact was inside a cabinet and the distributed was a part installed close to the antenna, but the other remains. So this is everything. So the only thing that goes out of this box, apart from the power connection, the power supply, is an Ethernet cable. All the base station is here. The antennas, the amplifiers, the controllers, the baseband, everything is inside this box. This box is maybe this size. Can be 10 liters, maybe between, depending on the person, between 30 meters height or 15 centimeters, sorry, between 30 centimeters and until 50 centimeters. And there are different flavors. And you can install this metro base station, what we call the metro cells, especially for rural coverage or for hotspots or for providing an additional capacity layer in your urban environment. The big difference between the other two, the residential and the enterprise, is that those were owned by who buys the Fernando. Me, in my home, the business owner, in this case, those are owned and controlled by the operator. It's like a small base station. But again, all you need here is an Ethernet cable. So this is why it's so good to have some pictures to show you real deployment of the snip. The big guys, like for instance, these metro cells being installed, like we say, maybe this is a lamppost, and it's very easy to install. If you don't require, first you don't require a crane. Sometimes you need a crane just to pick the cabinet and move it on the rooftop. You just can use a ladder or some other security probably constraint, but you will easily install one of these metro stations in a lamppost or inside a shopping mall. You cannot see here, but this is this here is a small cell, and remember that I told you all you need is the power connection and the Ethernet. In this case, the Ethernet is connected to this box here, and this is a Wi-Fi box. So you can use a small cell, and the transmission from the small cell to the core of the operator will be a Wi-Fi connection. And those are examples of femtocell that I showed you before, or inside an office, inside a bigger office. So those are the type of deployment you can find from small cells. Are you, I don't know if you in Spain knew that it's only Movistar today deploying small cells or offering commercially small cells. But have you heard about small cells in other countries?
Yes.
Where?
In Germany.
Germany? With the, are you a user of?
No, but my friend was.
Okay.
I mean, is.
So it is good because in Spain it was funny because it was not be very openly commercialized or advertised. It was just if you have a complaint and you call the call center complaining because I cannot make calls, then the operator will offer you one of these boxes. And it was a time when they offered that for free. Now they pay, I guess, in Spain it's just maybe €9 a month. In other countries, I mean, the country with more number of those small cells is UK. Because in the United Kingdom, they have a lot of issues with the coverage. And you know how rural is United Kingdom. So in those places, they have deployed more than 300,000 small cells. So it's one of the biggest, of the more dense countries where the small cells have been deployed. In the United States, there are more small cells, but the country is bigger and it's a different. In Europe, we can see this in Germany, in Italy, not too many countries. Massively deployed, I guess. I mean, small deployments, of course, in Spain we have just maybe 3,000, 4,000, maybe 5,000 small cells. I'm talking about residential small cells or enterprise small cells. This is London, by the way, and this in London, as I say, is one of the countries where they are deploying more small cells from the three different flavors: residential, enterprise, and metro, because they have issues with coverage. And in 3G, it was probably the only solution for them to provide this coverage that they are lacking today. Okay. One of the other things that I wanted to show you is that based on the small cells and the presence, the geolocation service that you can have in the mobile network, you can create new services. So the geolocation means that I know where a user is. Okay. But if your coverage is based on some capacity that the mobile infrastructure brings you, so it's not something that you need to, it's an application already available. The operators can know where you are just because they know where you are because the mobile phone is sending messages to the network. Very simple for them to locate where you are. The problem is that a cell, a macro cell, can be several square kilometers big. Okay? So a macro base station can provide coverage to maybe few kilometers. So you will find a person. Where this person is, yes, it's in Madrid, downtown Madrid, in the east of Madrid, or in the north of London. But go and find it. For security reasons, sometimes you need to go or to have more granularity. Small cells, the range of a cell can be just a few meters, or maybe 50 meters. So it's easier to find a person in 50 meters. We have inbuilt capabilities to provide the geolocation service. And you can, well, those are some examples. For instance, you can just have what we call TIN alert. So as soon as you get into the office, your presence will be detected, and you will get an SMS, for instance, welcoming you, or saying you are late again, or saying go directly to the canteen because we are having a party, whatever. So you open the door for new applications or existing applications, but you can actually squeeze and you can get actually more benefits. I'll give you one example just to give you, for instance, in a supermarket, you can go inside a shopping mall, and then your presence will be detected, and then you will be getting SMSs from shops where we want to give you a promotion, and you can get a discount coupon, and you can go to, I don't know, for instance, a Nike shop, and you will get a 50% discount. Because you have subscribed to a service with Nike and other shops that when I enter into a shopping mall, I want to be notified of any promotion. You cannot do that without these small cells because the geolocation service in a macro layer will not be able to detect that you are in the shopping mall because it's a small place. The same for a football stadium. A football stadium is a place where we can deploy new services. Because the small cells can be used to provide additional capacity and give you, for instance, all the video replays for the highlights of the match, real time. I just create one slide here just to illustrate what this is. So this is what we call the VIP banking queue buster. So you enter into a bank, you are a VIP person. This bank has an enterprise small cell. Okay, so as soon as I enter into the bank, the operator can know that I am there. So the VIP person, Mr. Smith, arrives to the bank, and just because of this is so easy, there's an agent that receives an SMS in his or her mobile phone saying, okay, Mr. Smith has arrived. Go and meet him on the lobby or wherever. At the same time, Mr. Smith gets an SMS saying, oh, welcome, Mr. Smith, we were waiting for you, go and see customer desk number 3, wherever. And this is just a very simple sample of the things that you can do. Without the small cells, this is not possible because you will not be able. There are other ways, but not so easy to know exactly when a person gets into some place, such a small place. Okay, so let me just go through some of the bad things about, I wouldn't say bad, but some of the challenges that we will see when integrating small cells. Small cells are good. They will solve especially the capacity issues that all of us are struggling with now. But there are some concerns that you need to know when small cells. This is the architecture. I wanted to show the difference between WCDMA, UMTS, and LTE. It's very simple. There are two approaches. Remember that we have a macro base station here, and remember that we have a controller, okay? And we can install, there are two approaches for deploying small cells. Either I just plug the small cells with the same interface to the RNC, okay? They will be like using the same infrastructure, or I can deploy what I call, what is called a small cell gateway. So both approaches have advantages and disadvantages. This one here is being promoted by most of the vendors having macro infrastructure solutions like Ericsson, Nokia, Huawei, except Alcatel Lucent. And this solution here, because this RNC is already there, so you have a 3G network from Ericsson, for instance. It's easy to deploy a small cell from Ericsson because you just connect it to the RNC, doing anything else. However, there are a lot of players providing small cell solutions which are not the standard for the traditional vendors, macro layer vendor like Ericsson, Huawei, or Alcatel. There are new, like Cisco, like Intucell, like Spider Cloud, like IP Access, new companies that are commercializing small cells. And they don't have an RNC. So what they have actually built is a small cell gateway. And this small cell gateway can actually hide the complexity of having thousands or hundreds of thousands small cells to the network. So one of the big issues with the small cells is the capacity. If you have an RNC, just to give you some numbers, an RNC can control, let's say, a few hundred of base stations, maybe 100. Depends on the traffic, right? But if you have dimensioned your RNC for 200 base stations, and your traffic all of a sudden starting increasing, then you cannot deploy more base stations. You need to deploy another RNC and connect new base station to the new RNC. So you think of deploying thousands of small cells, you will kill your RNC. You will kill, not only for the traffic that you will be creating, but for the signaling. Signaling, I mean, I mentioned before that your smartphones are sending data all of the time. But the signaling, the radio signaling is there before the smartphones. It's always there. When you need to, if you are making a call, you need to page where the phone, where the user is. Paging is just signaling, trying to locate where the user is. Okay? So this solution here is okay because it gives you the very fast deployment option, but you will have issues with the capacity. However, deploying a small cell gateway, you are getting a new box in the network, but it hiding all the complexity for having to, to support thousands or few hundred of thousands small cells. And from the core network point of view, all of these small cells deployed behind the small cell gateway will be considered as one small cell, or one cell. So it's very convenient when you have a lot of numbers. And on LT, remember we didn't have the controller, so it's kind of the same. So you can deploy, remember the macro cell goes with an interface which is called S1 to the core, okay? And you can deploy the metro cells in the same way, just connecting them directly to the core. Or you can deploy a gateway. And the small cell gateway will use the same, will have the same role as the WCDMA. In the case of LT, typically on the home and the enterprise segments, where you probably will have a few thousand of small cells, you would like to deploy a gateway. For the metro cells, remember those cells deployed outdoor for the public use, you would use maybe direct connection. That's about the interface. But the good point about PowerPoint is that you can simplify a lot of the things. So this connection here is really simple, but I will show you that this is not that simple. So I want to show you why small cells are, more information about the architecture. Because the key point about small cells is, one of the key points is security. So I don't know if you thought about it when I told you that the small cells in my home are using the DSL connection. So is a DSL connection secure to carry traffic? The DSL is something that can eventually be opened by any hacker. So these small cells, one of the things the first thing they do when they are switched on is establish an IPsec communication. So you switch the small cell on, you have some pre-configured information, just a couple of IP addresses. As long as you have an IP address given by the router, the small cell will go to the SAN gateway, will get SAN configuration, and will establish an IPsec tunnel. And then all the communication will go through an IPsec tunnel. Okay. This is securing and ciphering the communications. Because otherwise you will be exposed to hacking and someone eavesdropping your communications. Probably you don't care, but enterprises, if you deploy a small cell in an enterprise, in a small business, they will care. Okay? So this architecture here is a very simple architecture actually, but really what you have is what we call a security gateway, which is the first node, the first box that the small cell needs to talk to, and to establish the IPsec. Once the IPsec is established, then everything is okay. And then from the security gateway, you can go to the small cell gateway, or you can just bypass the small cell gateway and go directly to the code. For voice, for data, whatever. Okay. One other important point on this architecture is what we call the small cell management. So you know that base stations are controlled and monitored 24/7. So there are people watching screens, looking at alarms that are being generated by the base stations. Because if you have an issue with your base station, you need to know exactly or as soon as possible. Because that base station is giving service to a lot of people. If you have a board which is failing or something which is not going okay, there are people sitting inside an operational maintenance center looking at all those events. And in case there's an event potentially impacting the service, there is a protocol that the operators have to investigate further, to solve or try to fix the issue, or even to send people on the base station any time of the day to see what's going on. And sometimes you need to send someone, go to the tower, open the cabinet, maybe replace a board which is faulty, whatever. The small cell management means that I need to know what is going on these small cells. Probably not in the residential market. I don't think any operator will be looking at every single small cell or femto cell deployed in everybody's home. They don't care about your DSL router, by the way. They don't care. They can connect you because all the DSL providers can connect to your DSL routers using a special protocol called TR69. The small cells are the same. They will use the same protocol to connect to your femto. So if you have an issue, you can call your call center or your customer care center. My femto is not working. They will connect again through the IPsec tunnel to your femto. They will run some scripts and check-in, and they will say, okay, you need to reboot or whatever. So the maintenance in terms of operation and maintenance, what we call alarm management, basically, is just looking at the alarms that those guys are generating is a key point as well. And you will be probably just working in a reactive mode for residential and maybe enterprise, for most of the enterprises, but for some VIP enterprises, you need to as well to pay attention, as well as of course on the mechanisms which are deployed. One other point is the frequency band that I deploy the small cells. So you can imagine that deploying small cells below a macro cell can create some interference. For those of you who have studied some radio propagation stuff, radio frequency, you know that I'm using the same, basically there are two approaches, using the same frequency or a different frequency. If I use the same frequency, it means that I am very small, it's like David and Goliath. I am a small cell, and I'm using frequency 1, and I'm just installed below a big base station which has a lot of power in the same frequency. So how can I get the users connected to my small cells? This big guy is getting all the users because the power is higher. So when you are deploying small cells, if you have to share the frequency with the macro layer, you need to consider where to deploy the small cells. In other words, if you are sharing the frequency and you plan to install the small cell close to where the macro cell is, forget about it. You will not get any any benefit. The farther you go from the base station, from the macro base station, the more chances you have to provide basically the traffic offload that you need. Traffic offload means all the traffic that is being served by the macro layer will now be handled by the small cell. Okay? So the macro layer will be in a better shape, and the small cell will manage the traffic which is closer to the small cell. If you are using dedicated carrier, dedicated frequency, then there is no issue, because the small cell will work in frequency A, 900 megahertz, for instance, and the macro layer will work in frequency B, would be 2.1 gigahertz. So there are different, this is an issue actually, because not all the operators have spare frequencies to deploy small cells, or let's say, to dedicate exclusively to a small cell. And then they need to use shared carrier approach with, the interference mitigation is one of the key issues that they need to manage. Okay? One other thing which is important is what we call the self-organizing networks, SON, S-O-N. SON is a concept which actually, it was there in 3G, is now defined by the standards in 4G, and actually is making operators life easier. Before these capabilities of self-organizing networks, a base station was a pain, it was a headache. Any new site to be deployed, you require first, you need to go to the site, adequate the site, install the cabinet, install the equipment, provide the connection, and then remote. Sometimes you need to work locally, so you need to send a guy there, plug with a computer, do some pre-configuration. Then once the configuration is done, the base station will connect to the core. Then someone in the operational maintenance center will be able to access that. But there is a lot of things that was, a lot of things done by the operator, by the people. And people is a very expensive asset. So now we have progressed in the past few years, and we have, or the standards have defined new self-organizing networks functions. So the base stations are now more intelligent, meaning that they can do things that they couldn't before. These things are like self-configurations or automation. Now the small cell is able to be switched off. When it is on, then it will understand which is the frequency that it has around, and it will choose, for instance, the less interference frequency. And it will be able to dynamically adapt the configuration to reduce interference, to increase or to balance the load between different cells that are close to the cell. So a lot of mechanisms and algorithms that are there just to reduce the task that the operator needs to do today when they are actually deploying a macro layer. So it's important because when you are just deploying, let's say, a few thousand of base stations, by the way, you know how many sites an operator like Vodafone or Telefonica have in Spain? Sites, macro sites. Site is a place where you can have a base station with those big antennas. Or France, or Italy. Yes, guess another.
8,000.
8,000? 5?
5 to 8,000.
5 to 8,000. More than 20,000 sites in Spain. More than 30 sites, I guess, in France. When you have just 1,000 sites, I mean, you can manage to have people looking at those base stations. When you have 20,000 plus hundreds of thousands of small cells, you cannot pay all the people you need to keep those small cells alive. So you need to have this kind of procedures, these kind of mechanisms to automate things. And just in case there's an issue, I will be reporting and I will be sending people, I will be looking especially at that issue, but not by default. Okay, and this slide is actually has to do with one of the questions that we had before, the integration with Wi-Fi. I mentioned before that small cells will provide 3G, 4G, and Wi-Fi together. And the boxes that we saw before, some of them are multi-standard, what we call 3G and 4G and Wi-Fi in the same box. Some others, they are just 3G, some others, they are just 4G. You can have Wi-Fi as an option. But the truth is that you need to or the operators, if you want to actually monetize this kind of investment, this kind of installations, you have to change the way Wi-Fi is used. As I mentioned before, if you are just getting to your home, your mobile phone will connect to the Wi-Fi. If you are in a hotel or in a university with free Wi-Fi, that will be your first option. If it is overloaded, what do? You just switch the Wi-Fi off and probably use your cellular connection. So the integration with Wi-Fi, it will call carrier grade Wi-Fi, means a tighter integration between 3G, 4G, and Wi-Fi. Meaning that there is new boxes in the network which will dynamically and smartly move the connection from Wi-Fi to 3G or to 4G depending on different feeds. For instance, the load. I can get to a Wi-Fi if I'm in a hotspot and I have a small cell which is 3G, 4G on Wi-Fi. And the Wi-Fi is okay, and I'm paying a service for a number of megabits a month. My first option would be Wi-Fi, okay. But if the Wi-Fi is overloaded, this guy here, or this new intelligence here, will tell, okay, the Wi-Fi is being overloaded, I cannot give this user the service that he's paying for, switch it to 3G, or switch it to 4G. And the user will just, they will not be doing anything, it will be transparent to the user. But this is the type of things that we will see in the future. So a close integration between Wi-Fi 3G and 4G, with common authentication processes, by the way, because sometimes you will be able to identify on the Wi-Fi point of view as well with your SIM in your mobile phone. Sometimes you will use some other authentication techniques. But the point is that the operator can actually provide Wi-Fi with quality of service. Because I'm sure that when you are using free Wi-Fi, do you expect that to be high quality? It's free, right? But if you pay for it, would you expect to be giving you the high quality you are paying for? Right. So this is why this mechanism will be there pretty soon, allowing this what we call roaming between Wi-Fi, 3G, 3G Wi-Fi, 4G, and this could be possible thanks to the small cells and thanks to the new functions which are being deployed in the core part, which controls all those users, the profile, which type of services the users can have, etc., etc. Because you need to differentiate the users which are paying for this added value service from those users which are just getting the Wi-Fi for free. And you can have both living together in the same Wi-Fi hotspot. Okay, so we are getting to an end. Some deployment. This is just a typical slide that we show to our customers, but just to give you some names of the deployments that we have. References, okay, just to give you this is deployed small cells, home enterprise, or metro cells are deployed worldwide. Mostly in 3G. Now we have some first deployment on LTE, especially in the US, because you know that US and Korea, as I mentioned before, are the most mature markets from the LTE point of view. But those are, Vodafone is one of the biggest customers, especially in the UK, because of the issues that I mentioned before. There are too many customers. So let me just give you some example of where the small cell can be, because the concept is capacity. I guess you have now understood that one of the constraints that we want to solve with the small cells is the capacity. Sometimes coverage, but mainly capacity. So some examples. For instance, we deploy, this is a horse racing event that is taking place in Melbourne every year. You can imagine that it is a 3G connection that will be in 2 or 3 days. I don't know how many days, but there are a lot of people. So the 3G coverage and capacity there is not dimensioned for that event. You will not deploy a big base station just for 4 days of the event. So we try the small cells there, and we prove that just by deploying a few, maybe 12 or 10 small cells, you can manage the capacity increase that you need for that particular event. Another example is you have a rural area where you don't have enough coverage, so people cannot make calls from home. Remember that we mentioned at the beginning that we are also changing the areas. So people, they don't have fixed lines anymore. or they don't have to have fixed lines anymore. So they just have a mobile phone. So if you are living in a rural area or in a suburb where you don't have coverage, as soon as you get home, you will not be able to make calls. So one of the options is to deploy small cells, and we prove as well that by deploying a more number of small cells around the area, we can provide homogeneous coverage, and at the end, you get your customers being able to make calls. This is the benefits are actually twofold. First, you get an additional increase of revenue because the user will be making calls that they were not doing before. And actually, the other benefits that you reduce the churn. So you avoid the customer to move to the second operator, which probably is providing better coverage. Some more examples. This is relevant because it was done in the Olympics in London in 2012, where we deployed more than 1,200 enterprise cells in the Olympics accommodations. So it was a good test of the small cells. It was 2 years ago when the small cells were just starting, and it proved to be a good solution. Now they removed those small cells. They installed it for the event, and after the 2 months of the Olympics, then they just removed them. But it proved to provide a good, good numbers in terms of traffic being carried and data being carried by the athletes. And the other kind of typical application is on venues, on stadiums, football stadiums, or basketball games, where all of a sudden you have 17,000 people. Have you ever experienced connection issues when you are in a football game? Try to download a video, or even make a call, or even send a WhatsApp message. It's getting harder and harder. So one of the things that we are doing is promoting small cells for small stadiums, or even for big stadiums. So you can place the small cells there easily. You can keep those small cells there, or just if you have a big game, you can deploy to reinforce the coverage and the capacity. Just remove the small cells once they get installed. So there are typical scenarios where we are deploying small cells. So as a wrap up, before just the last 2 slides about the job opportunities that I have, the key messages that I want you to keep on your mind. I hope you don't forget at least 1 or 2 of them. Small cells is a reality now, so it's a new concept. It's not that new actually, but it's a reality. So all operators, if they want, can deploy small cells. It is a fact that the small cell deployment will likely to be in a multi-vendor environment, meaning different vendors, different Alcatel, Lucent, Ericsson, and Huawei, and Nokia sharing the same region. The small cells need to provide multi-access technology, 3G, 4G, and Wi-Fi. Maybe not all of the 3 at the same time, or in all of the cases, but yeah, it's good to have multi-standard small cells. Deploying small cells are unique, meaning that they are very different from the macro deployment. And you just need to look at the pictures that we saw before, the big base station and the small cell, how different they are. And just by knowing that the small cells can be deployed in a lamppost or in inside a shopping mall, you notice that how different the installation of a small cell is compared to a macro. And an additional point is that from the operator's point of view, small cell is not just the box, the weight of the box, the size, and how easily can I install it. It's the end-to-end. It's the box, is the connection from the box to the core, is the maintenance, and everything. It's an end-to-end approach that I need to take care of. Which sometimes you forget when you say small cells, very simple to deploy. Yes, it's true, but there are some things that you need to consider. That's the last slide on the.
How much time is needed to set up and plan, for example, for an event to set up all the cells, like an event of 200,000 people?
So if you, for instance, if there's a Formula One championship race, okay, you will need to provide additional capacity because you select maybe 70,000 people attending. The first thing you need to do is a radio propagation study, a network planning, You need to understand the radio environment, and then you need to decide what do I want to do. Typically, it's a 1 month work. From the theoretical phase where you just get the information from the operator, which are the metrics that you have, the frequency, until you go there and deployment. Once you have the transmission, I mean, the power could be simple, but the transmission, the Ethernet cable, and the transmission from the spot where you will deploy the small cell to the core of the operator, that's the most important one. If this is solved, it's very simple. You can install a metro cell in 2 hours. The most important part is the radio planning. Small cell, you can just plug and play, okay? But if it is a shared carrier, as I mentioned before, it wouldn't work. So you need to look at the environment, and based on that, you will spend more or less time. Any other question? Now you know what is a small cell. Small cell is. Okay. Last 3 slides to describe a little bit of some job opportunities in Alcatel. Some of you will be finishing this year, so I guess you have already started looking at what I want to do, what I want to be. Okay, Alcatel is launching a job opportunity program, especially in Belgium. There are opportunities all around the world, but especially in Belgium. Belgium is one of the most important sites that we have in Europe. In Belgium, there are huge R&D centers, and the Bell Labs. Bell Labs are initially, the Bell Labs I mentioned before are in New Jersey, in the United States, but the second big spot where Bell Labs are actually in Hamburg, Belgium. And there are open positions in all these what we call ultra broadband access, which is LTE, small cells, fixed access, fiber to the home, in all those areas, and in all IP networking. Those are the 2 pillars that we have. All IP networking is routers. You know what a router is, IP routers, optics, internet. So those, in all those roles, you can find open job opportunities. What we can offer actually as part of being part of one of the most innovative companies. I will not talk about the compensation package because I guess it will depend on the person, the country, and the situation. But what I can actually tell you is that internally there are a lot of career opportunities. Once you are there, it opens the door to different career opportunities. The company is very open to move. If you want to move from one country to the other, or one position to the other, there is a concept which is what we call smart working, which is very convenient. Basically, you have flexible working hours. Actually, we do a lot of teleworking. So we have our laptop. We can connect from everywhere. Actually, in Spain, we can work from home whenever we want. We just need a DSL. And there are some other companies where you need to decide, for instance, I want to work from home Monday, Fridays, whatever. So we have full flexibility. We can work from home anytime. And actually, there are people just working from home. They just go to the office whenever there is a meeting or whenever there is a customer meeting. But other than that, they stay at home. In Spain, it's not that normal, but in countries like the UK, for instance, where distances are longer, a lot of people do just teleworking. They just have a virtual office, and the company just gives you all the tools, the laptop, the IPsec tunnel to communicate from your home, everything. And I will give you just one contact name that you need to write an email to in case you want to apply. I will send you the slide, by the way. I will send you the slides, so you will have the slides and you will have the contact name in case you want to send an email. And if that's not for Belgium and is for any other site, do the same, and we will reroute you your request to whoever needs to be your Okay. And that was all. Any final question? Not on small cell or whatever you want to know. No?
How many users does support the residential?
The residential, we can support 4 active users simultaneously, meaning that there could be only 4 people. In our case, I'm talking about application between 4 and 8. There is a person with 4, 8, maximum 8, meaning that the 8 people calling or making a call, a voice call at the same time. Data calls, using WhatsApp, using YouTube, there is no physical limit. But the voice calls is the more limiting factor in this case. 8 simultaneous voice calls in the residential. I'm sure you will not need more than 4. Any other question?
Right, so smart cells are something that could be in every house and interact not only with the smartphone, but with other smart devices that they're going to develop in the future.
Yes.
Right? Okay,
But so, yeah, good point, because actually sometimes I forget to link this bridge with the Internet of Things. But one of the things that we talked before, that smartphones are changing the landscape. Smartphones are sending data all the time. We don't control which data is being sent. Machine to machine, which is basically the Internet of Things. Machine to machine is actually when you have small devices sending data. They are not a smartphone. It's like all the utilities are using now smart meters, for instance, or the security alarms that are using a GPRS connection. So those are machine-to-machine connections. So machine-to-machine connection is a machine which is sending data to something else without any intervention from anyone. Today we have just a few of cases, as I mentioned before, utilities meters. So your gas, water, and electricity meters are now sending all the consumption with GPRS or with GSM or WCDMA devices that the utility company installed in your meters. Whereas you can find different examples, but in the future, what we call the smart city concept will actually, you have millions of those devices in a regular city. And all those devices will need to connect to a cellular network to send data. So having small cells close to everything will actually facilitate that those small devices will be able to send the data that need to send. So in your home today, maybe why not in the future, your fridge will be able to connect the small cell you have in your place with the meter, with the alarm system. Everything will be connected.
So Alcatel is producing technology for houses too, or only for telecommunications?
Only for telecommunications. The closest you will get from Alcatel Lucent is this Fernando residential small cell. Okay. But behind that, everything is basically falls into the telecommunications infrastructure world. But you just see the router, the DSL connection, you just see the router. But from the router, there is a copper cable which goes to a connector, something aggregating all the connection from the label pools, and then it goes to the port, and all those equipments are commercialized by people like Lucent, by Huawei, by those vendors.
So the concept of smart cell is like to jump continuously from a smartphone to another in a scenario like a urban environment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a connection which jump from a smart cell to another. If you walk on the street,
Yes.
It is not the danger to have some hidden, some dark point in the jumping process, or there is a stable continuity.
So it's a good question because typically small cells will deploy below a macro layer. So what you call is the handover process. The handover is when you are making a call and you move out of the coverage of the base station you are connected to the coverage of the next base station. So the handover means that my call will be kept without me noticing that, without the call being dropped. and the code will be transferred from one base station to the other. Okay, it's the same concept. It's solved. There are mechanisms today to handle the handover from the small cell to the next small cell, or if there is no continuous coverage between two small cells, it will go from the small cell to the macro, and then from the macro again to the node, or from the small cell. So this is solved. Of course, one of the things that I mentioned before about the small cell gateway, this is because if you have too many small cells and you are handing over too many calls from one small cell to the other, at the end, the signaling traffic will increase. If you have too many small cells. This is why the small cell gateway is so important, because you hide this complexity from the network.
As well, if I over-dimension the amount of small cells that they put, do I have the risk to have a kind of interference between?
Normally, deploying small cells for public is something that the operator will do with true planning. Okay? You will look at so typically, why do you want to deploy a small cell in a public place? Because you have capacity issues. The first thing you need to do is, where do I have those capacity issues? All the operators are taking a lot of metrics from the network, on number of call drops, number of data call drops, throughput per user, megabit per user, megabit per of the rush hour. You cannot imagine the amount of people and investment the operators do just to get metrics from the network. Because metrics will actually be the only way to measure the quality. Okay. So the first thing is just understanding, where do I need a small cell? I identify this is the hotspot because I'm losing a lot of calls are being dropped. So there is a team of radio experts and optimization engineers that will go there, will understand the environment, and will select the best spot for the small cell or small cells to be deployed. And it will be just an exercise they need to do just to optimize the whole environment. Any other questions? Okay. So thanks for staying alive for almost 2 hours. And enjoy the rest of the week. There will be another person for Alcatel coming on Wednesday morning, and he will talk about cloud and network-defined networks and some more IT kind of stuff. Because now, as I mentioned before, the telecommunication industry, so years ago, the telecommunication industry and the IT world were two isolated worlds. Very different. Actually, in the same operator, the IT people couldn't stand sometimes the telecommunications people. Now, they are overlapping, and this overlaps means that telecommunication infrastructure, which was dedicated with given hardware, given application, now is being moved to the cloud. So it will be an interesting speech as well. I hope you can attend. Okay. Have the rest of the day free?